Well, picking the perfect jury, it's what each side in the George Zimmerman case is aiming for. Much easier said than done, though. But the jury is one of the most important elements of any trial and will be crucial in the Zimmerman case. We want to bring back our renowned jury consultant, Richard Gabriel, joining us out of California. He actually helped pick the juries for O.J. Simpson, Phil Spector, Casey Anthony. You know, Richard, it's like you're batting 1,000. We all want to know what your secret is.
Well, it's a combination of luck, and you just have to really understand the psychology of human judgment. You got to really be able to look inside people, take a look at these characteristics about some of the attitudes and experiences that sometimes they themselves aren't even aware of what's going to drive their verdict in the case. If you can look into that and take a look into the future and see how they're going to work with other people, and you're lucky, obviously you can get some good results.
I'll tell you, that's a gift. I wish we all could do that just in our personal lives.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? I'd be curious to know what, I mean, I'm thinking our viewers would want to know, what made him a jury expert? Like, what was his background? What did he do before?
There you go,
just
Richard. Give us some inside scoop. That's right. The judge wants to know the behind the scenes of Richard.
Well, I'll tell you, my mother is a retired judge and my dad's a psychologist.
Richard. Okay.
So for Zimmerman, then, let's put it in perspective here. What's the ideal juror look like? First, let's talk about the prosecutors in this case. Ideal juror.
Ideal juror, I think, for the prosecution is somebody who has experienced profiling. Clearly somebody who's been labeled, stereotyped, and has had negative judgments about them. That's somebody who's going to identify with the prosecution case. I think also prosecutors are also looking for what I would call motive jurors. People who are going to take a look at George Zimmerman's story and go, you're the one who's the aggressor here. Trayvon really had no reason to attack you. And so they're looking for that story element of somebody who says, Zimmerman's the aggressive. I think the other thing that prosecutors are looking for, quite frankly, what I would call a presumption of guilt jurors. There are some jurors who walk into the courtroom and they're just like, you, the defendant, wouldn't be here unless you'd done something wrong. I'm already thinking you're probably guilty. And I think the last quality is a juror. I think they might be looking for parents, because I think parents have a special place in their heart that just says, he's a kid, he's going home. What could be aggressive about that?
All right, how about
I think that's what the prosecutor's looking for.
And what about the defense, you know, the perfect juror that Mark O'Mara is looking for?
I think gun ownership is going to be a significant trait. Gun owners tend to think, look, those are the sort of, even though stand your ground is not being alleged in this case, the people who say, look, gun owners are people who say, you got a right to defend yourself, and I think that that's what George Zimmerman was doing. I think they're looking in a sort of a reverse psychology sort of way for a law and order juror. George Zimmerman is the block captain. Neighborhood watch, people who can identify with him as just protecting his neighborhood. I think to a certain extent, he says in his tape about, look, these places have been robbed, so crime victim things might also be a characteristic that the defense is looking for. And I think lastly, an outsider. Because let's face it, in one of these cases, what I think the defense is always looking for as a last result is a hung jury.
By the way, that's George Zimmerman's. Richard, I just want to point out to our viewers, we're taking a shot right now. This is George Zimmerman's wife. We've got pictures in here from the courtroom. This is Shelley Zimmerman. So I'm sorry, Richard, finish your thought. We just want to let folks know why we were holding on this shot.
Right, and I think this goes to the key of a six-person jury. It's much... Prosecutors have an easier time getting 6 people to agree on a verdict than 12. So I think the defense is also looking for an outsider, somebody who's going to mix it up, polarize the jury, maybe split them so that they can't get a conviction.
I'm wondering, Richard, if you can just talk a little quicker to the fact that because this is, you know, so many people say this is a story about race. This is a case about race. How do you pick a jury? Because you need a diversified jury as well. So how does that come into play in a case that's as sensitive as this is?
Well, it's going to be a huge issue there. Seminole County, a little less than 1 million people. I think it's like 80% white, only less than 10% black. So those African Americans are going to be looked at real carefully. And certainly, I think the prosecutors are going to be really careful on what they call a Batson challenge, which is that if they feel that somehow the defense is striking African Americans, they're going to be on them very steadily, because you have to pick a diverse jury to represent the county. So those people are going to be looked at much more carefully. And in terms of it now, race, I think, is going to be an issue in this case, because obviously it's become a social issue. It's become an issue. But race really underlies that whole issue about profiling that I'm talking about, which is that anybody who feels that they've been profiled, that's been targeted because of a characteristic. And so I think, but especially those African Americans that come into the box, or anybody of any religious thing, then I think that's going to be an issue.
Judge, I'm just curious, because you're, as an African American woman and a judge, what are your thoughts before we head to break?
Yes, and I will just say, Richard, to your point too about this diversity piece, it's going to be harder when you only have 6 jurors. I mean, if you've got a panel of 12, you know, you've got more chances. And the fact that we have the numbers that Richard's saying, you know, 80% white, only 10% African American, but there's going to be a real problem, and it will be a challenge from the prosecutors, appropriately so, if there are no African Americans on this panel.
We're going to keep this conversation going, and we also want to ask you, what do you think the 5 must-read Zimmerman documents are? We actually have them for you at HLNTV.com, including the complete police and autopsy reports, by the way, and new details about the much-publicized hoodie that Trayvon Martin was wearing the day that he was killed.